training. But it's everything else. It's how do you deal with each athlete? How do you motivate an athlete? How do you communicate to that athlete? How do you hire a staff? How do you deal with a staff? How does one have good individual meetings with athletes, or when should you have team meetings? And so those are all the little elements that we want to foster with the Art of Coaching. And the name is exactly what it is. There's 1,000 ways to coach. You may coach a certain way, I may coach a certain way, and it doesn't mean the way you coach is right and the way I coach is wrong, or vice versa. It's for all the different elements, particularly in the United States. We're a country that's enmeshed into those individual freedoms, so people want to do things the way they want. But there's some elements that hold true. What are those? And how do you teach people that are in the coaching profession that this is what they need to learn? So our whole point was always that it's an art and it's eclectic with lots of different way of doing things. And we're going to present to our coaches, here's a lot of different styles, a lot of different coaches, and here's some nuggets that you can get from each one of them.
So are you expecting people to pick something to imitate, or more or less find the things that are a fit? Because I think some people feel the pressure to coach like that coach did. This is what winning coaches do. It gets
correct.
It's
correct.
Pitched in the form of help, but I think it can be very limiting.
Well, for sure, and I think it's also you could take go a step further and say that it really depends on your personality, because it's easy for me to be like Coach K, but that may not be my personality. Or it's easy to see a successful coach coaching any sport, but the most important ingredient that they're going to have that you may not have is the great athletes. So what do you do in making people that are average better? Your goal as a coach is to put your team in a position to win. And that means that, hey, they're going to do everything possible in a competitive atmosphere with certain rules and guidelines of the sport to be the best that they can be. You are the guide to get them there. And I think you got to be careful. You can't just emulate what coaches do and say, I'm going to do this exactly. But secondly, what do they do that's the commonality that all good teams have? All good teams have skill acquisition, which we stress more than anything, because in any sport, if you don't have the skill, you're not going to go very far. And then, how do you transform that skill into the right tactics? And what are the right tactics? But then all of that goes out the window if you can't communicate to the athlete, if you can't understand that what's a good corrective feedback loop to the athlete. How do you get him or her to perform at their best when they've just struggled in the last practice or in the last game or match? Those are all the things that I think those are the nuances of becoming a very good coach, is to pick up on corrective feedback, pick up on how do I motivate that person in a different way when they're not doing well. And part of it is that, hey, sport is the only meritocracy left, I feel, because, Dave, it doesn't matter if you and I are hitting 300. It doesn't matter how old we are, where we're from, our religion, our ethnicity. We're a designated hitter in the American League, and that's the beauty of sport. And at the highest levels, at the peak of the pyramid, having coached the best in the world in volleyball in the Olympics, that, hey, it doesn't matter where they're from. If they have all the ingredients of the skill, temperament, attitude, work ethic, hey, they're going to beat other people out. And that's what I love about sport. That's the ingredient that keeps me always focused on. It's exciting to develop a team. But also, I think what's lost in what we said earlier is, if a person doesn't enjoy what they do, if they don't have fun, if they don't maximize the pleasure of the moment, which is my definition of play. It's an old philosophical definition of play by John Huizinga, maximizing the pleasure of the moment. You're not going to get very far. And I think we've drilled that out of a lot of kids this day and age, because kids have become automatons, thinking they're going to get a college scholarship or play in the pros or play in the Olympics, where they shouldn't be thinking about that. They should just be thinking about enjoying the sport and mastering skills so that they can be better at it and enjoy the sport even more.
Yeah. In my world here with my daughters that play a lot of lacrosse, she's just gone through the recruiting. She's got her path figured out for 2019, but in women's lacrosse, they went through this change of just, in other sports do it, but it snuck up, I think, on women's lacrosse fast, which was about 3 years ago. Suddenly, 8th graders going into that summer before they get to high school were being recruited. And the pressure on those girls was so noticeable for 2 years. And my daughter's club team that is just hitting on all cylinders, last spring, when the rule came in place, said, you know what, we're stopping this. No more talking to these girls until September of their junior year. Well, last summer, in that cool-off period, if you will, they knew people were watching them, but just the fact that nobody was worried whether or not they got a call or an email Sunday night after their weekend tournaments. They have always been a very loose group. They always hang out together and whatnot, and the same with us parents who were watching. But there was something very different when it took away that worry of trying to get to the next level, and they played. And it really did a tremendous amount of good for them, because their confidence also went up, because all they kept noticing was how well they were playing, and their coaches were reinforcing it, saying, wow, just keep doing it. And I think that it was an interesting thing to see, because some of them the previous year were getting tighter, and sure, they were, when they were 16 going on 17 last summer was very different from 1 year 15 going on 16, but I really think it wasn't just the maturity, it was taking away the worries of expectations of others. Did you get a call? Hey, did they invite you up for a camp or something like that? So I'm with you. It's trying to create that atmosphere, but let's go back to your website, though, and some of the tools that are on there, because you talked about communicating, and you'll hear everyone saying, well, we've just got to communicate better. That's an end result. But what exactly, how do you help people that say, I know I have to communicate better. I know I've got to get a feedback loop. I just don't know how to do it. What's available? And also, let's get the address to your website. How can people get to these resources?
Well, each website is the Art of Coaching Volleyball.com, the Art of Coaching Football.com, the Art of Coaching Softball.com. That's the way to get to the websites. But if you're talking about a specific strategy or technique for communicating, the first thing I would do is to say, let's learn how to listen. So let's make sure that I, as a coach, listen to my athlete. What is he or she saying, and do I really understand that? Vice versa, hey, the athlete listening to the coach. And the way I do that is, a lot of times if I'll say something, I'll say, hey, did you understand it? Repeat it back to me. What do you think I said, or what is the meaning in what I said? So you establish a non-threatening way to make sure that we understand each other. Because things are always misunderstood, and there's, people in this day and age of smartphones and the constant looking at a screen and the tiny bites of info that I want, sometimes people just aren't on the same page in going back and forth and acknowledging each other. So I'll say, hey, the other thing I want you to do is, whoever's talking to you, whether I'm talking to you or you're talking to me, let's maintain eye contact. Let's not interrupt each other. Let's we give you the opportunity to say what you think. Now, obviously, in the heat of battle in a game or even in a practice, those have to be done in a communicative fashion that quick and to the point. So if you change that to how do we communicate in practice, we're going to pick and teach people key phrases, cue words that based on one or two words, you're going to know exactly what I'm saying. Knees, hips to target, platform, get your platform out. Hustle, what does that mean for me? Relentless pursuit, what does that mean? So they need to know those definitions so that they know exactly what's being said in a practice environment, what's being said in a game. And then the other point I'd make is the consistency of communicating. The way that I'm talking to my team in a match in a game has to be the way I talk to them in practice. Because if all of a sudden it's different in practice or it's different in a game, they're going to get a mixed message. And the last thing I'll say is in communication, you just have to be honest and you have to be direct, concise, succinct in your comments. And once you do that, it's going to kind of let you be a better communicator because of all those things that take place.
Yeah, and I was reflecting on my past season this spring, trying to see which of those and how I worked on them. And I will say that I got some good advice from a very successful coach. I met her at the rec level, but that was in between her coaching Division I, named Sandy Bridgman, and she was really good about coming up with the one-word cues during a game.
Yeah. Those are big. Those are big.
Yeah, and it was from that, and this is going back almost 8 or 9 years, but it's taken a long time for me to kind of figure out, but how do you boil it down? Because you want to say so many things from the sideline, but they can't hear it, especially in a transitional game, or in a wait and see what happened game like baseball. You really can't do that to be saying too many things. You mentioned not just the cues, but the consistency in them. And that is hard to do for coaches. And I was thinking about that the players would actually say, wait a minute, you just said that before, but you meant something else. And I didn't even realize that I was speaking loosely as if I was talking to, someone who thinks exactly like I do and could interpret which version. So, yeah, that's really helpful. And that's what I'm really glad you did that because, again, looking for sources that actually tell you how to do it, not what to do. We can all write down our top 10 lists or these lists of things that are obviously the way to do it, but getting there is the hard part. And you made a bit easier here, I think, for people to see how to communicate. Let's talk about a few things I've picked here from some things that I know are your main lessons, but surrounding yourself with the right people and exceptional people. I took a look at that as one of your key points. And again, everyone says, right, I want a great staff, only hang, as they used to say back in my day, if you want to soar at the eagles, you can't hang out with the turkeys and things like that. But how do you do that? In other words, how do you actually attract, retain the right people, and then right with air quotes there?
Well, I think what you need is somebody that's going to say, I will do whatever it takes for me to improve in whatever vocation I'm in. So somebody that is willing to work hard, someone who is going to be dependable and reliable. And I really underscore those two items. One thing I've taught my children always is that once you meet someone who's dependable and reliable, hang on to them because you're going to find out that most people aren't dependable, reliable. And so the other is trust. Anybody I work with, whether it's a team, whether it's a staff, people will say, I have to earn your trust. I go, no, you don't. I'm going to give you a bank of trust. But once you break that trust, we're in trouble. Because I want to see how that's going to work. So you need to just, once you get people that are very goal-oriented, that want to work hard, that are dependable, reliable, that know that they're going to make mistakes, but they're going to just learn from those mistakes, that is surrounding yourself with good people, finding people that are of different strengths than you are. All of us have strengths and weaknesses.